Are you a leader, manager, entrepreneur, business owner, or knowledge worker? Are you leading people or wondering how to be a better leader in your own life and work? If you are, then you can be experimenting better. Welcome to The Experimental Leader, a podcast that takes a look at the ways leaders are experimenting in their own work. Hosted by Melanie Parish, we dive into real-life conversations about how people might be using a scientist's mindset and experimenting in their work. Shift your leadership into something that works better. Join us on The Experimental Leader today.
Hi, everybody. I'm about to share with you a recording I did for International Coaching Week. And I wanted to tell you about the three guests that I have with me on this recording. First, I have Darlene Chrissley. Darlene is a master's certified coach with 20 years of experience working with a range of industries in Canada. She also is a founding faculty member of the Adler School of Professional Coaching and the International Coach Federation Toronto chapter. Darlene's a writer, an inspirational speaker, and a performer, and her book, Conversations for Power and Possibility, was published in 2012. And in 2016, her solo show, In Chaos I Trust, was featured at the Toronto Solo Theatre Festival. My next guest is Marita Fridjhon. She was born in South Africa and is based in the USA, and she's co-founder of CRR Global. Marita has an academic background with degrees in medical and psychiatric social work, as well as family systems therapy. As CEO of CRR Global, Marita heads up a global distributed leadership team with partners in 14 different countries and a global training faculty. Marita is a highly sought after global speaker and is the co-author of the book, Creating Intelligent Teams and Systems-Inspired Leadership. My third guest is Libby Robinson. Libby is the managing partner of Integral, an award-winning leadership and executive coaching company working with Fortune 1000 companies globally. She's a former Wall Street banker, aerospace engineer, and national champion equestrian. Libby has worked for 26 years with senior leaders globally, helping to bring more mindfulness, resilience, and greater capacity to brilliant and ambitious leaders. Libby's been a master certified coach since 2009, and Libby's also the director of coach training for the Advanced Coaching Practicum, an accredited coach training program with 5 tracks from ICF initial certification to a gaining MCC and master coaches community. I hope that you will enjoy this recording and the celebration of International Coaching Week. Hello, and welcome to the Experimental Leader podcast. I'm Melanie Parish, and I am so excited about today's podcast. It is not often that one gets to invite one's mentors to be with them on a podcast. And as I was looking at International Coaching Day or Coaching Week coming up, I decided I would just invite some of the people that I admire most to come and have a chat with me on the Experimental Leader podcast today. And I want to welcome them today. And I wanted to welcome 3 people who have been powerful influences in my life. I want to start with Marita Fridjhon, who is the founder of CRR Global, a co-founder of CRR Global, and one of the mentors of a program and a coaching certification that I had. And my friendship with Marita goes back to probably 2008-ish. I was actually in the program before that, but that's when I met Marita. I remember the moment. And it's been such a powerful relationship in my life. So it is one of the foundations of who I am as a coach. And so I'm so grateful that she came today. And Darlene lives in my city and has been a mentor coach to me. She signed one of my master certified coach letters of recommendation when I became a master certified coach in 2012. She is a master certified coach at the university where my husband works, and she's been a dear friend and colleague, and she's someone I can get together with and talk about all things coaching and have for many years. And So I'm so excited that Darlene was able to be on this call. She's also one of the founders of the Adler Coaching School. And so it's spectacular to have you here, Darlene. And then Libby Robinson is a huge mentor to me now, and I currently am faculty for her coaching program, the Advanced Coaching Practicum, and I get to explore helping people gain their master coaching certification as an instructor in her programs. And she's been an amazing mentor in helping me find a new part of myself as a mentor coach. And so I feel so grateful to have the three of you here to talk about coaching. I think I've been a coach for 23 years, and it's not easy for me to find too many people that have been a coach longer than I have, but I think all of you have been. So welcome to the Experimental Leader podcast. It is so great to have you here.
Thanks, Mel.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Well, I want to just open this conversation up. And I just wanted us to start by talking about how you have seen coaching change over the last 20 plus years. And I'd love to start with Marita.
So, interesting question. I think that one of the ways in which it has changed, and if I go back to the early beginnings, when I came, I was a burnt out therapist. I've been a therapist for a while, and I came into coaching. It was as if everything that I've done thus far came together in the coaching modality, where we were literally looking ahead rather than in the rear view mirror, the way we most often do in therapeutic practice. So it came together for me in a wonderful way that everything I've done so far can be used, repurposed in a slightly different way. That is evolutionary also. So I think that one of the things that was very prominent at that stage, and this was in the 2000s, was that at that point, certainly in the US, there was a big challenge where the therapeutic field felt that coaches now do a short training or a cheaper training, and then they'd end up doing therapy. So there was a little bit of a bump between the coaching world and the psychotherapeutic world, or the mental health world. And it really was us who have been in that field. I felt like that was one of the first contributions that I could make as a therapist, to be able to sit talking to other therapists and talking about how therapy actually has made me a better coach, but it's a very different approach from what we used to do in therapeutic interventions. So I think that was an eye-opener for me in the beginning. And when I look at it now, where we see so many people from the mental health and therapeutic world join the coaching industry, and then take that back into the therapeutic field in a very different creative way as well. So I think there's a lot going on at the moment that we can talk about, but for me, that's an arc that I've observed in the coaching industry in the beginning as it came to be. So I'm curious to hear what Libby and Darlene also feel about it, or saw.
Yeah, Libby, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. And Darlene, is that okay? Good.
Sure.
All right. I love what you said, Marita. I'm not a therapist, although I have had about 2.5 decades of therapy. So maybe that counts for something. I think one of the things that I've seen, I feel like we've come full circle in coaching. Back in the day, I think even the Harvard Business Review talked about the wild, wild west of coaching. Like everybody was just out there. So, and FYI, I've been a coach before the ICF even was created. So I feel like a dinosaur. But I think the first thing was we needed to get stickiness. Like we needed like coaching, just getting out there. When I lived in France for 26 years. And when I said I was a coach, they were like, you know, are you a soccer coach? Are you a, what are you talking about? It was almost unheard of that, you know, coaching people, leaders, companies, you know, that just seemed out there. And then we got tracking and data and ROI and research that I think really solidified the bona fides of coaching as a real live tool modality, way of being. And it wasn't just something that anybody could hang up a shingle on. And I think kudos to the International Coaching Federation and to European Mentoring and Coaching Council to really have held the reins well and brought the profession along. I think then what we've seen is this kind of, for better or worse, the business people get a hold of it, and what do they want to do? They want to scale it. And while I think scaling and the democratization of coaching is great, I think then we start to get into the next piece, which is kind of, it's ubiquitous, like everybody's a coach, right? And if everybody's a coach, nobody's a coach, right? So what is our unique promise of value in the world from that? And so, then I think the risk for coaching is that the word goes out of favor or it becomes mundane. And I think we're at such a critical juncture in the world between climate and politics. And I don't mean internal domestic politics, but just, authoritarianism and things like that, what we need more of is a kind of a coaching approach, an empathetic listening. If everybody's got a YouTube channel, no one, is listening. So how can we bring this sort of intimate profession into the next place? So I think there's been many stages, and it's almost like we're at a new cycle again.
I'm going to say ditto to both things that were said so far, because I'm in total agreement with everything that's been said. When I first became a coach, I had been an associate registrar at a university, and I had come to the point where that sort of annual cycle was getting on my nerves, because I'm an entrepreneurial kind of person. And so I went up took a leave of absence because I knew I wanted to leave, and picked up a magazine in the Family Circle, and it talked about coaching. And it talked about coaching as a vehicle for helping people find more meaning and fulfillment in their life and work. And I said, I want to do that. And so that's what brought me in. And like my colleagues here, I was there sort of for the first meeting of the International Coach Federation conference, and right from the beginning of the foundation. And it's been exciting to be part of that. When I started coaching, I started as a personal coach, because I wanted to help people find more fulfillment and meaning in their life and work. And I think it's kind of funny that now I am a corporate and organizational development kind of coach, working primarily, lots of places, but after a long circuit and much in between, working with the leadership of the university where I originally was when I went to coaching. And what I think, that's a personal story, but I think what's different from then now is I was leaving it for something that was brand new and never been heard of, and how integrated coaching is now. So that in a faculty that I'm working with, the leader of that faculty with really ambitious goals for raising the profile of that school and everything saw coaching as a fundamental vehicle for developing the leadership to make that possible, and integrated that coaching as really in the foundation, coaching and storytelling as the foundation of the leadership program that they had me develop there. And then working with the leaders, how much they took off with it and how they grew and changed. And even I'm losing the word, but how they came together, seeing something like the challenges that early career women in STEM were finding, and the people of the coaching program for leadership on their own created a coaching team and started studying coaching for the development of that. And so, from being this fringe thing off on the side, it being really understood as something that can build a culture, that can build leadership, that can really be infiltrated through an organization, or maybe not an organization, but at least a faculty or a division. I think that's huge in terms of just the scale and the integration. And I think I would balance that with what Libby was saying, right? Because the scale and the commercialization and it being sort of a tool for getting more out of people, like all of that kind of thing, and a tool of, oppression or getting people always to be just doing the same thing, mechanization, that's also weighing there, but I've been very excited to see the growth of how it can be seen and used.
I think it's so interesting what all of you have said, and I echo much of it. I also, I think my big pet peeve is the people, it continues to be the same pet peeve for the last 20 years. It's the people who wake up one day and decide they want to hang a shingle and call themselves a coach without any skill or knowledge or training. And because they're good at selling, they become the voice of our industry. And so I'll speak that voice here too, that's, but they seem to be getting more traction now. So I've had conversations with people as I've been trying to learn skills, been offered coaching at much higher rates than most ICF certified coaches charge, for people who never bothered to get credentialed, who don't actually offer coaching, they offer consulting. And I just continue to be sad because those people could become coaches and could offer the skill of coaching in those industries, but they are able to offer it faster. They're more profitable if they don't train. So that kind of that's actually one of the changes I'm seeing right now in coaching, that the best paid people are people who woke up and don't actually learn the craft of coaching.
Facebook Marketplace has ads have a lot to answer for. How easy it is.
I think that's right. I actually think
scale
that
that way.
Media, yeah, and they're buying in. People are buying into a dream of fast money, and the people are selling a dream of fast money, which I'm not sure that anyone's pulling off, but that's the dream that people are willing to invest in, and the product that people are able to market. So, which I think coaching has a lot more to offer. So I think coaching gets tarnished a little in that process. I have seen that people come to me later because they realize they actually want coaching, and they've hired a couple of those people that didn't work out, and then they come back to they realize they'd actually like some skill behind the coach they hire. So that's fun to see that may actually be. It gives me some hope that it will be a short-term trend, that people get sucked in to the dream without the substance. That they'll realize they like the substance also, and then look for the substance.
It's so interesting. This conversation reminds me of the work of Arnold Mindell Process Work Institute in Portland, and was talking one day with Ani, and he's one of my mentors, and he was making a strange comment. He said, when you think about a coaching session or a conversation with somebody, usually in the first couple of minutes of that conversation, the thing will emerge that needs to be worked on and that needs to get traction in the end. And it took me years to understand what he was talking about. But if we look at this conversation, where the conversation started, but we don't know that is the emerging pattern. The conversation started with me talking about the rift between therapy and coaching, where the therapeutic world was saying, you do our stuff, but you're not trained for it. And in the evolution of coaching, we can see that this is what is beginning to happen now. That therapy was pointing to the fact that coaching was an unregulated industry. And right now, the biggest, and we're not talking about where we are now just yet, but we can see how that's the piece that then is now emerging in the coaching industry, where everything that the ICF, EMCC that we are talking about is pointing and moving the needle in the direction of becoming regulating bodies and regulating who can call themselves a coach. Because the piece that, without finger pointing, but the piece that we are talking about at the moment is anybody can call themselves a coach at the moment. And the same thing that you talk about, Libby, I was a serious tennis player, and I had a tennis academy at some stage where I was a tennis coach. So what is a coach? We could see but there's an emergence now in the direction that you're talking about, Lillian, and it was present in the very first opening of our conversation, regulation of the industry. A pointer there, and now here we are in that conversation and in that work.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So my next question for you all, and I'll point this to Libby first. What's been one of the most challenging things about your career personally? Either with coaching or, business, wherever you want to go with this.
Sure. So I'll just say COVID was terrible for our business.
Yeah.
I do know some coaches who thrived during COVID, like they were brought in. It was a real roller coaster for us. We had a lot of stops and starts, and that was very painful. I was lucky to be able to keep all the staff. So, financially, I would just say that was a black swan event that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. Not that anybody, I think, could possibly do that. I think the hardest thing for me personally is because I run a business with a lot of associate coaches, and I also run a coach training school. I'm sort of the head chicken all the time. And so there's a little bit of, it's lonely, and I don't mean lonely at the top, because there's not that, we're a pretty flat organization. But I bring people more into projects than people bring me into projects. So there's a little bit of this kind of wistful, like puppy dog nose on the glass of thinking that other people are out there collaborating more. So I think that there's just something about coaching that's very intimate. Again, from what we just said, that when running running a business can get in the way of having those relationships with people, mixed relationships with people. So yeah, I would say that's it. And probably the only other thing is I need to ride more horses. So this is my goal. I have two goals: ride more and only do things that bring me joy, which is C.1 for that.
I can weigh in here. I refuse to stay in this conversation firmly in the role of facilitator. That seems a lonely place. So I think for me, the most challenging thing about my career has been being a solopreneur for most of my career. The loneliness. I think that after I wrote my book in 2020, I brought on, a full-time tech person. And that has been really fulfilling to have a collaborator in my business. I don't think it's even profitable. It's just funner. And it brings me joy to do work with others. And I think I make many of my business decisions now about, does it involve others? Is there collaboration? Is there, it's funny because you'd think that talking to people all day long wouldn't be lonely. But for those who are listening to the conversation, it's not a two-way conversation coaching. It's a container for a conversation about one person's life. And so it's really nice to have, I have clients who are like, can't we just get coffee sometime? And I'm like, sure, we can get coffee, but you're going to say to me, hey, how are you? How are your children? What's going on with you? If we're going to have coffee, it's not coaching.
I just want to interject here. I called a friend of mine in Paris this morning. I've known him for 30 years. And I proactively called, and I'm going to Paris. I wanted to talk to him about, he's invited me to stay at his place and different things. I had things to say. And when I was on the end of the phone, he spent the whole time talking about himself. And then when he was done, he was like, okay, see you later. And I'm like, what is it about us that that makes it okay? I wanted to wring his neck afterwards.
Well, because I think we're good at it. Like, we're good at our jobs, and I know in my coaching, when I have a coach, it feels really good for someone to talk about me for an hour.
Maybe we need to be better at interrupting.
skillful interruption is part of the competencies.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I guess I
Exactly.
didn't.
Yeah.
I fell
That
into
right.
that.
Finding that little breath and going right for it.
Yeah, Darlene or Marita, do you want to weigh in on the challenging, like what's been?
Yes, I will weigh on the challenging, but I want to violently agree with what is being said about that lonely path. And it's one of the things that we found when we did the research for our book on system-inspired leadership, was that the feedback from leaders that done our training and did really from a more systemic view, we're looking at things. We're talking about how when they can lean into their teams without having the answers, which is part of what we talked about as systems-inspired leadership, because leadership is a role that belongs to the system, and at any given moment in time, somebody has an answer different from mine that belongs to it. So that piece. But I think the turn that I want to take a little bit is, I think the most challenging thing in, yes, to all of what is being talked about, but I think the most challenging part, I'm sitting in right now, in the US. I was born and raised in South Africa during the apartheid era. And the biggest challenge that I see in coaching at the moment is around decolonizing the coaching industry. And one of my biggest challenges is that I am a white female CEO. And it's one of the things that I'm aware of as the four of us are talking, that again, it's that diversity issue. And how do we decolonize? How do we bring different systemic equity? I think it's a huge challenge. There are different challenges in different countries and in different cultures. I was talking to a partner in Turkey at the moment, and we have begun to forget about what's happening in Turkey after the earthquake. But the devastation continues. And I think one of the biggest industries is a little bit also challenges is what you talked about, Libby, with COVID. And because we're a global organization, the different challenges that shows up in different countries and cultures for coaching. But I think the overarching challenge for the industry is, how do we decolonize? How do we do it differently and bring in different diversity?
Yeah, I just want to say that for what it's worth, I think all of us in coaching, we have diversity and merit scholarships. I would venture to say that we have one of the most diverse cohorts coming through our level 1, level 2, and level 3 programs right now. And that's a shout out to Pam Reckel, who's on our diversity committee, for helping us and basically putting our money where our mouth is.
Yes.
And we just had a DEIJ class as the ICF is saying now that this is a competency. We need to be able to say those conversations are available and I can handle them, or not. You know, we have to also own up to where.
And no, when I can't. Yes.
Yeah.
No, totally agree with you. And again, it's one of the reasons why in our mission and vision, we took a little bit of a balcony view and started talking about systemic equity, because systemic equity it's a broader view, since we sit with the worldview and there are different pockets, but the gender issues also plays into systemic equity, whichever one we are looking at. So I'm mostly sitting in the fire with the Black Lives Matter issues in the US, and I agree with you, Libby, that we working in the direction of bringing and doing whatever we can to get different representation and more representation. But it's there still is the time spirit of the thousands of people standing behind every Black person that gets shot or that is speaking this out. And it's a long journey. And how do we do that without fixing it in the same way that we created it? How do we do it without judging those that we think are wrong because they're against diversity? So how do I do it in such a way that is not with the same blame and the same aggression and the same ugliness that things happened in the past? I think that is one of the challenges for us as coaches in the industry? How do we walk the talk of that?
Mhm. How do you transcend and include?
Yes.
We just participated in Loretta Ross's course on calling in. It's actually Loretta Ross is the host of it. Lone Tran was the creator of the phrase. And I'll shout that program out. It's an amazing program on how to do human rights work with love and honor and respect, and calling people in. The course is running again in August, and it's $20 because they keep the price low and accessible. There's an option to add more to the price, which I did because I thought, wow, that's really inexpensive. And I thought, oh, wait, if I think that, then I'm the one who's supposed to add the more at the end. But it was it's a fantastic program with some actionable practice sessions that were also incredibly thought-provoking. So that's a cool space to look at.
It's interesting, like being in this conversation, which is a very high stakes conversation, you know, and how can we show up with our gifts and our what we have to bring, but also open to everything that we don't understand, right? And how to even begin to structure that as a body of coaches. And I was thinking, as you're saying that, how deep and powerful it is, and how my take on that same question went in the entirely different direction in terms of more selfishly, when you said when you asked about the challenges that we've seen or faced. And the first one that I would say for myself is that I've spent my whole career being just a little bit ahead of my time. And I think that my colleagues here probably the same, that it's a challenging thing always to be bringing something new, right, and not understood, and to try and create that opening, and to develop that dialogue, and to have people see the potential and bring it in. So it's almost everything I've done has been from that place, right, of taking something from the fringe to the mainstream, and the challenge of always being on that pioneering edge, even as, you know, we were speaking now, right, how to be part of that. The other thing that's been a real challenge for me is how to scale individual coaching to make it pay as a business. So I started off as a life coach working with individuals, and still have never been able to figure out how to make that work the way I would want to work it in a sustainable job. I mean, not without having an extremely elite clientele, you know, with a lot of money. So I haven't done that, and I found myself instead sometimes by default, because I have a systemic view and other gifts, right, going into to organizations or places where there is a structure that will pay and support that. But there's always a tension in that, because the people in those organizations are always means to the end, and so the investment and the measurement and all of that kind of stuff is the value of that person to whatever the larger entity is trying to move. And that's sometimes aligned and sometimes not aligned, but that sense of being a utility is something that personally I find very, very challenging, right? Because wanting to really have that freedom of having that person's unfolding and their vision and their skills, and that be able to flower and find expression. And that's what drew me to it, what I most love to do. And I'm not saying I can't and don't do that in sort of organizations, but it always feels like I always wish it was possible to for more people to afford coaching in a more pure space.
I want to combine a couple of questions now. And, you know, the mentor coach in me is like, oh, you're going to stack questions, Melanie. But I'm going to, because I want to combine them so you can answer them the way you want. I want to ask you, what's been the most rewarding thing about your career and what excites you about coaching now?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'll start with Marita.
I love to hate you, hate to love you.
I
What shall I say
love
about
to love you, Marita, too.
I think COVID, one of the good things that came from COVID was that because of the isolation that COVID created and the careful ways in which we, once a week or whatever it was, going to the stores, I will get to the question to answer. One of the things that I started doing was I started thinking about how do I create social construct and the work that we do in coaching, how do I create it in the grocery store?
Mm.
So I started this thing that when I go to the grocery store, I would have conversations with the person that checked me out, or the person that packed the bag, and we would joke, or I would talk with the people behind me and I think for me, those were experiences where I suddenly realized that we hold coaching sometimes too much as a profession. What does it look like on the street? What does it look like with ordinary people? And I think that provided me with highlights, not only from a social construct perspective, but from that place where, wow, this needs to happen to all of us on the street, not just in that paid situation, even if pay is not as great as you're talking about that. But how do we do that? And you can cut this out if you want to, but here's an example. I stood in the store one day and there was a guy that checked me out who by now he sees me and says, Fridjhon, it's you that's here. You're my first client today. And so we did our thing. And then as he was checking me out, I noticed somebody coming in from the side and there was a big milk jug sitting on the corner of the checkout counter. And the person grabbed that jug and slammed it on the table and said, thank you for forgetting my milk, and walked out. And he looked at me and said, I have never seen that person before. I have no idea what she's talking about. And I started putting together that she must have forgotten, or somebody must have forgotten to pack it in her bag or whatever it was. She got home and the milk wasn't there, and then that kind of thing. But I watched him just being rattled. And at some stage, he was busy with my stuff. He could barely concentrate. And at some stage, I said, I wonder what happened to her this morning before she came here. And he stopped and he said, I never thought of that. That is what we call a coaching moment. But I think we don't often do it enough out there. I did another podcast where you're talking about family as the last exam. I can be a really good coach. But there are times and evenings and nights that you do not want to see me with my... So I'm sorry, I'm going to go to the minute small things, but for me, I think those are the moments that I have a dream that in post my life, this is what will happen between people on the street. Not just in the, yeah.
I think I'm looking around my bookshelf to see if I can find it. I think it's Jeremy Fox who wrote a book called The Empathic Civilization.
Yes.
And
I think it's
and it's just it's monstrous, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages. I can't admit to having finished it all, but I every once in a while I strum through it. And I think that's if coaching is the tip of the iceberg of what is possible between people, then we should be teaching coaching skills in kindergarten. I think in everywhere, like I happen to have spent 26 years in France, and I came back to New Jersey, and New Jersey always has a little bit of a chip on its shoulder of not being New York, right? And it's like, it's like, you looking at me, I'm looking at you, right? There's post COVID, it feels like everybody is just waiting for their milk bottle not to be in their bag, and it can be hard. So I would love to see our profession even have, just like as medicine has many disciplines and things, is that we continue to have multidisciplinary type coaching where it marries itself with different other modalities. And maybe, I don't know if anybody's doing coaching with children, but even just teaching those skills, because I think we used to think that those skills would get transmitted by parents or family or things like that. And I think there's no guarantee anymore that is. And I think what excites me, Melanie, is it's gonna sound terrible, but I wish this was the last podcast I was on, and I don't mean that in a terrible way, but I want to invite you to my beach house and have us all be together. I think that's one of the things that I'm seeing in our clients, is that they're hungry now for the face-to-face connection. And I think if anything, that we have a possibility of reinforcing, not mandating, but reinforcing the community ties. So going back to your supermarket example, I think we have an obligation in our profession to be spokespeople for that kind of empathy, kindness. Doesn't mean that we can't be upset or have conflicts or things like that. It's not Pollyanna-ish, but it's actually the fundamentals of social connection, belonging, inclusion, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like to coach more politicians too, by the way.
May not be skillful enough for all of them, but yes, I love your reference to children and making it available easier and earlier, because I think kids, I've seen how some of our coaches that use it with their families, the kids get it before the coach parent does. And it reminds me of that Einstein quote that says, until you can explain something to a 6-year-old, you yourself are not understanding it properly. So there's something, and that's. What about you, Darlene?
Picking up on the Libby's childhood conversations. As was mentioned earlier, I was involved in especially in the early years of the Adler School of Coaching and building on Adlerian principles. And Adler's work and philosophies and his encouragement, etc., were first most adapted in the childhood education field. And so it made me think again about those connections. Early on in the school, we had piloted some coaching for children around that. And I don't know where that's gone because I'm not really involved in that world, but it just made me think about, again, ways to do that. And I know some independent school systems do, but how to, in a place where they're even banning books in schools. I went to see Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, the movie last night. And the fact, and I was a librarian in my first career. So just seeing the power of that and how zealously guarding the impact on kids and trying to sort of keep them corralled in a particular mindset is happening. So, I mean, there's so many challenges to trying to address kids in the culture. So you've just got my mind swirling away from the original question and into the possibilities. So would you repeat the question for me now?
What excites you about coaching now, and what has been the most rewarding thing about your career?
All right. So what excites me about coaching is really what I said earlier about how it's possible now to be invited into an organization with a broad remit for how coaching can be used and integrated into the fabric of that, and to see the multiplied blessings of that, all the spin-offs of it going everywhere. And that's just the most thrilling thing, especially for someone who's always on the cutting edge, to now be seeing some of the reaping and the multiplication of that has been pretty great. But that's not what's been most exciting to me. although that's great, it's been again personal, right? I'm back to that from my own fulfillment, is that coaching has opened the world to me. You know, I went from a job where I was an administrator in, you know, a large organization, and out into the wild west of coaching that was just emerging. And it's taken me to meet so many fascinating people, into, you know, working in IT. I mean, I've worked in agriculture in Norway, you know, and in hospitality in the Middle East, and in all of the different places that it's taken me, and to be pioneering new work. As much as I said that's one of the challenge, but to be pioneering new work, meeting new people, expanding the world, it's provided that to me in a way that I can't imagine any other career doing. So I've just yeah, it has allowed me the fulfillment in life that I most wish for my clients.
It is a kind of a cool job.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to hear all of you, and as I said at the beginning of the show, how much each of you are mentors to me. I often find myself as a coach, I think of myself as a bit of a goody two shoes. Like, you can't really hire me to go like kill your colleagues in a high, you know, fast-paced tech world. Like, I'm not going to be your Machiavellian partner. I'm way too, I want to like find common ground and be nice. Like, I'm just not all that. And I wouldn't have thought I got that from anyone, but then like, you guys are all kumbaya about children and coaching, and like, wow, like, of course I'm that. Like, I know where my roots are. Anyway, and I'm as kumbaya as all of you. I run in 3-year cycles, and I published my book in 2020. I think I'm at the end of a cycle, so I don't know what I'm excited about next. It's interesting. And there's always like this dead period where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll never have another thing. And I think that's kind of where I am right now. So it's interesting to hear what you're excited about. I do keep having this sort of thought in the back of my head that is something like, I think there's like a deeper conversation between people. Like, we get to about 3 questions and then people wander off. And what if we went deeper? Like, what if just whatever you were talking about, you got more curious for another few questions? And I don't know what those questions are, and I don't know, but it's like people, it's like they get ouchy when they go like 3 questions in, and then it's like they touched a hot stove and they run away. Like, that was enough. And so I keep being curious about what if people had a conversation that was just like 5 questions deep or something. And I don't know how to facilitate those, or how to, but that's sort of, I don't know if it's coaching or it's just talking, or it's just like going to a campfire and sitting around, but it's the thing that's kind of calling to me. And also in coaching, like, to just go a little, like, to keep asking those questions that go a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper. And it's amazing what you can do in 10 minutes, I'm learning, if you don't shy away or act like there's a red hot poker. So that's kind of what's exciting to me about coaching and teaching. Like, wow, I didn't know. Who knew? I thought I wasn't a teacher. I think as long as it's really, I might be. If I don't have to deliver curriculum, I could be a teacher. So I'm excited about that too.
Melanie?
Yes.
I would just like to hop in there, just because you use that kumbaya phrase to refer to us. And I just, that just landed with me a little self-depreciating.
I'm so sorry.
No, it didn't. Don't be sorry, because it's good, right? Because I had a reaction to it, which is wonderful, which the reaction is, I think that it is kick-ass brave to have these aspirations, to dare to think on those scales. to challenge the, real world orthodoxy, even as unchangeable, kind of as being, a little bit in the woods in the fireplace, instead of in the fray. And especially when I was listening to Marita speaking earlier, right? I just thought how brave to think so ambitiously.
Mm. Have you ever heard of the Bechdel test? So
I remember the name, but not at all what it means.
yeah, so it's from so the Bechdel test is from Alison Bechdel, and it's about analyzing a film. To pass the Bechdel test, a work must feature at least two women, and these women must talk to each other, and their conversation must concern something other than a man. And I was just thinking about how amazing it is to talk here with women about coaching. And I was thinking about, how international all of you are, and how little we've talked about that, and how it's in the background, but it's not the landscape. And the landscape is quiet and immediate somehow in our conversation. And it's just a very different conversation to have with the four of us. And so I'm just appreciating that. And the Bechdel test just came to mind of the richness of the conversation that we had and how special it is to me.
There, you made me think of something, and I have no idea. So we're now dialoguing with questions or something. But if there was a moment for me, it came back when you talked about how international experience, how much international experience there is here. And when I talked earlier about coaching starting from mostly whites, I misspoke the language because English is not my first language. I talked about decolonizing of coaching. It's decolonization, right? That's the correct word. It's decolonization. And these are the ways in which even those of us who seem to be so confident and so whatever, we catch ourselves, and there's a moment of, oh my gosh, it is a podcast that you can't edit that one out. And I used the English, that's stuff. I was going to put another word with starting with an S there, but how we have our own inner judgments in so many different ways, and how it's not always safe to talk about our own differences. So it was just, you reminded me when you asked what is, I can't even remember what you asked because it was so essence for me, but there was that moment when I realized that there was something that I did that was a little bit embarrassing. Oh, you were talking about something, and you were asking if we were talking about something that's uncomfortable. I was like, man, I abused the English language there. And I was looking for the word. I was absent for a while there because I couldn't figure out what was. Oh, it's decolonization. Okay, I got it. That's probably a take. Go away. Go ahead.
Totally. But it's so funny to hear, and hear you say that. I think it's one, I don't know about you, Melanie, but I didn't notice. And two, it's like I just see you as just a competent, like I all consider us all wise women, and maybe or at least the three of you. So the fact that even at your level of competency, we sometimes still
all
have
of us have that
things. It's like that's the whole, you get to be human, and you get to
yes. Yes.
I have this I don't know why this is here. I have this card, and it says, "Well-behaved women rarely make history." And so I want us all to be really not well-behaved, and I think that's something that I like to bring into my coaching is a little bit of a reverence of, it's just me.
Totally with you there. Totally there. But yeah.
Well, and Marita, I want to say that when we started doing our podcast, we had our 3-year anniversary in March, and for the first year, we had people on. It was kind of people we knew, and we started to realize it was really easy for us to have cisgendered white men. They had books, they wanted to be on the podcast, and I realized that I wanted other voices. And I realized if I was going to have other voices, I had to become more comfortable to say things wrong, to talk about race, to talk about gender, to talk, like, I just might get it wrong, but I had to be brave. And I'm sure I've gotten things wrong over the years, but we really try to keep our platform open to people who don't look like me. And it's been a journey. Like we focus on it intentionally and continually. And it part of it is that it has to be safe to fail.
Well, and again, I think I brought the example, not from a puny place, but from that place where I want for all of us, starting with myself, to have a different, it's just empathetic understanding of what happens across from us. Because it doesn't matter how competent or how self-assured or how whatever anybody presents. Every single human being has a deep sensitivity that I think the more unskillful people get, it's because the more protection they put over those insensitivities that we then begin to judge as them doing nasty stuff on social media. But what is it that is being protected underneath? So I think that there's just, if we can bring more compassion for knowing that humanity, what you've said, Melanie, we all fail.
We're going to
fail.
Failing. We're going to fail sometime.
Failing is part of what gets us moving forward. So but how do we normalize that more and more and more? And know that there is no there. All of us are going to have that experience sometime or the other.
So I want to give you each a chance to say where people can find you. So where can people find you, Darlene?
You're best to reach me by email at darlene@lifescapers.com. That's like landscapers with a life instead of land.
Perfect. Thank you. Libby?
Well, you can find me in 2 places. For our leadership development and executive coaching work, you can find us at www.integralcoaches.com. And for our level 1, level 2, and now level 3 certified, ICF certified programs, you can catch me at www.advancedcoachingpracticum.com. Thanks.
Thanks, Libby. Marita?
I think for me, the email is a good place to start with as well. It's Marita, Marita, @crrglobal.com. And then the crrglobal.com website have access to all our programs and everything that is in process, and podcasts and resources. And then our latest book on system-inspired leadership. We got some bestseller status here in the Americas, and we now have been, I don't know what the status is now, but system-inspired leadership has been a #1 under leadership books in the Netherlands for a while, and we're now translated into German and Dutch and Chinese and Japanese, and system-inspired leadership is so much of the expression of what I think we hold and believe.
That's amazing.
And such a phenomenal contribution to our field. And I just want to honor that.
Thank you. Thank you. As make all of you.
Well, happy International Coaches Week to all of you. Thank you for the contributions you make to the world of coaching, and thank you for being on my show.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Experimental Leader. We hope you have found value in today's episode because we're dedicated to helping you become the experimental leader you want to be. To access the show notes or learn more about working with Melanie, visit melanieparish.com. Go experiment.